Yeah, Bob, a couple of weeks ago I asked you if this team was tough enough, and you said you didn't know.
Yeah, and I didn't like the question then.
Yeah,
So,
you didn't know. You said you didn't know.
because you're asking something because we had fumbled the ball twice. It had nothing to do with being tough. We played a good physical Kansas State team, and we were there with them. You turn the ball over and have a 14-point swing, you're not going to win. I thought it was a dumb question, and I still think it is.
Gives to DeMarco Murray, left side, 35, 40, 45, 50, 45, 40, 35, 30, 25, down the sideline, to the 10, to the 5, touchdown, Oklahoma!
They're number one in the nation. They failed in Miami on conversion. They're going to go for it here. 4th and goal from the 1. Sundberg, the quarterback. Pitch outside. Jeff Smith. He didn't get there. Fumbles the football. Oklahoma takes over. Oklahoma held him.
All right, guys, welcome to the 4th and Goal podcast. This is your host, Kamiar, joined by my co-host, Stephen Brown, and special guest, Alan Kenney from BlatantHomerism.com. He actually does some pretty awesome podcasts as well. It's good to have you on today, Alan.
Oh, man, I really appreciate you guys inviting me on.
So he has some really awesome content on the website, BlatantHomerism.com, but also he has a really awesome podcast where he breaks things down and has the tolerance of Ian Boyd. Not many people can talk that much with Texas football folks, but Alan is a saint.
Well, I just like I always like chopping it up, man. So, I'm happy to have Texas fans, whatever, on.
So we'll dive into talking about defense and then some Kyler Murray stuff. Let's just get on to the projected starters that you guys think for next year. So, talking about the skill guys, or the guys that aren't on the front four, the Will, the Sam, nickel, and the secondary guys, who do you guys have projected as those starters?
I think if you start at the Will, you're going to go with Caleb Kelly. I think he's already made that transition, and he's probably your best option at that spot. As well as you go Sam, you're going to look at Ryan Jones probably. He's a guy that's really versatile. He might be the most athletic Sam that they have, and probably in recent years. Looking at the nickel and safety, you're probably going to have Buki, Radley Hiles, kind of switching between depending on schemes. And then my two corners, Jordan Parker and Parnell Motley.
Yeah, that is pretty close to what I'm thinking. I think that Caleb Kelly, obviously, they moved him to the Will for a reason, so he'll be there. You got the Mike, Kenneth Murray, obviously, is kind of a shoe-in there. The Sam position is interesting, because they've got a guy, there in Ryan Jones who really hasn't, seen the field yet, but he's more athletic. He's more of a cover guy. They can probably do a little bit more schematically having him there as opposed to what they were doing last year with Caleb Kelly at the Sam position. But, it seems like there's always, kind of somewhat of a deference to seniority. So maybe, Mark Jackson starts off there and Jones works his way in. I'm not entirely sure. I also not sure how often that position will even be on the field. Given the number of, spread heavy sets that they'll be seeing. Nickel, I agree. I think it'll be Brendan Radley Hiles there. And, but I also think he'll probably start when they're also in their base for DB package. Also, I think he'll be a starting safety along with Khalil Houghton. Corners, I definitely think Motley's going to be one. And, I could see maybe I think the other one still feels like Trey Norwood might have it, have the edge there just with Parker coming off, ACL injury.
Yeah, I feel relatively the same. I think I've got Caleb Kelly at the Will. I think I've got Ryan Jones at the Sam, of course, with Kenneth Murray being that inside linebacker. Makes the most sense. Then I got Brendan Radley Hiles, Buki at nickel, Parnell at CB1. CB2, I kind of put Trey Brown along with I'm really unsure about CB2 because you've got a bevy of guys that can go play that. You've got Trey Brown with elite speed, Jordan Parker coming off that ACL. You got Trey Norwood, who's a little undersized but gained a lot of experience last year. So I'm really unsure about CB2. Then you've got Khalil Halton, and I think Robert Barnes is going to play, but I feel like in many schemes they'll take him off the field and they'll have Buki play one of the safety spots and just have other guys play underneath that they've got at defensive backs and cornerbacks. But what about the big uglies up front, which are the jackbacker / defensive end, nose tackle, defensive tackle, and the other defensive end?
Jack Backer is a little bit interesting this year just because you don't have a true guy there, like a guy that's been there and is experienced. I think Mark Jackson's probably your best bet, at least early in the season when you're going up against those three big offenses. But Addison Gums has a big chance to work his way in and probably pass up Mark Jackson in the Big 12 play. Then up front, I've got Fayamatu and Gallimore. I think those are your two big guys, and they crowd the line more than everybody else on that depth chart. And then Kenneth Mann's my go-to defensive end.
Yeah, I mean, I see it playing out similarly. I wonder if, one thing that they've seemed to like to do in the past is shift the, at times if they can keep as many guys on the field and just have them switch roles, they seem to like to do that. So what you might see, which would be interesting, is Mark Jackson maybe starting the year at Sam, but then in pass rushing situations, maybe moving him over to that jackbacker. But I like Gums there, and then at the nose, it seems like they moved Gallimore there for a reason. So that's who I'm going to think is going to be kind of maybe getting most of the reps there. Then at the 3 tech, I like Amani Bledsoe still. He's a guy that his reputation probably is a little bit out in front of the production, but it seems like he's just built so well for that spot. And then Kenneth Mann at that strong side defensive end position.
Yeah, I agree for the most part. At that jackbacker, I've got Addison Gums as far as when they play kind of bigger teams. He's incredibly athletic, very, very long arms, something that OU's had in the past, but not really that elite speed, kind of with that length with it that they've had in a while. Then I agree, Neville Gallimore, they moved him inside, I think, and so he really only has to focus on one thing instead of containment, other things that they've been worried about, so his light should turn on is what they're hoping. You've got Amani Bledsoe, which if he can stay off the PEDs, will stay on the field. And then I think, like you guys said, Kenneth Mann, he's a little undersized, but he's a very, very good rush end that'll complete that, especially for Big 12 play. I think that'll round that up. But the real question is, what do you guys expect the defense to look like in this coming year in comparison to the last few years? Because if it's a different scheme this year or different look this year in past years, do you think that's really the reason for struggles on defense when they keep on switching on what they want to do?
Well, I like the corner situation that OU is in. My big question is how are the safeties going to do, especially in Big 12 play? You have 2 new guys filling in there and maybe possibly a freshman. So that's probably my biggest concern. But overall, they look more athletic and they look like they have more size. So up front, they should be good against the run game.
It seems like really it's like they're putting fingers in a dam, a leaky dam a lot of the time. And last year, for example, a lot of it just started. I felt like obviously there were, a myriad of problems, but really the biggest one was just how often Jordan Thomas, wasn't holding up his end of the deal there at cornerback. And it reminded me actually a lot of the year before when teams were really picking on the cornerback opposite of Thomas, whether it was Micaiah Quick or Parrish Cobb, or eventually Jordan Parker settled in there, and the defense actually looked pretty good once they had that all settled down. So, so long as those, corners, I feel pretty good about Motley, and then whoever ends up winning the other job over there, I mean, I feel pretty good about them. And so, that's really half the battle right there. I'm interested to see how they end up scheming when they do go to nickel. I think that, Jordan Parker last year, that knee injury, obviously it hurt the depth at cornerback, but it also kept them from really, potentially using him as a nickel corner and using Parnell Motley maybe as the nickel back. So how they end up working that is going to be definitely a big thing to watch.
Yeah, and I agree with you guys that those defensive back spots have really, really troubled OU in the past couple of years. I mean, if you go back as far as 2014-ish, you have Ahmad Thomas and all those issues that came with it. Ahmad Thomas looked great his junior year, but his tape from his sophomore year and his really senior year weren't all that impressive. Then you have, like you said, a leaky dam kind of situation when you've got Will Sunderland, who is definitely slated to play that midfielder kind of free safety look, and all of a sudden he takes things from Headington Hall and he's gone. So you got to deal with that. So in a lot of his defensive back issues, in which Jordan Thomas was the main guy and Parnell Motley was another guy that was really coming on strong. Then the next year, you're expecting, Oklahoma's going to have pretty decent cornerback play, 1 and 2, and that's going to be the first time in a while. And then the next thing you know, Jordan Thomas is just awful. Like, he takes plays off, he's getting beat, and it's not even really that they're going at him a ton. And he lost his job to a freshman, and he then became special teams guy. And it's unnerving, and it's kind of nauseating to see how that happened to him. And I don't know if he's still in the league yet, but it's befuddling about how his career trajectory from him backing up Zach Sanchez and then him being the guy, and then he just went down really, really fast. It's just really, really odd. So for the defense coming into this 2018-19 season, do you believe it'll be better than last year's? Do you think it'll be worse than last year's? Or do you think it'll be about the same as far as production?
That's interesting because on paper, at least, it should be better, right? I mean, recruiting isn't everything. Stars aren't everything. But on paper, you have more stars on the field right now than you've ever had in, 3 years?
It's been a while.
So on paper, they should be better. Will they? I think that really depends on who steps up at safety.
Yeah, I'd like to say that they'll be I feel certain they'll be better because, to a degree, it would be hard to be much worse than they were last year. I'm very, I really thought that they'd improve last year, and of course we saw what happened. I do think that they're going to be better on the defensive line. I do think that I can't imagine them being worse at corner. And if they can get that shored up, then that makes things a little bit easier. So, I mean, I'm projecting them to be better. Now, are they going to be, all world? Obviously I don't see that.
Right, and I agree with that. I think you have plenty of depth at cornerback. Now, injuries can happen just like that, as we've seen in previous, summer workouts. So injuries can happen just like that, but they have lots of depth at cornerback. They have lots of depth on the defensive line. There are a lot of guys that can play that they can rotate in on the season, and that has not been the case really till very recently. So I feel like just filtering in these guys throughout the games, having constant waves, especially of the front four, front seven, it's going to be very helpful to them and Mike Stoops. But I think, like many people, I expect them to be better, but we'll see what happens when you're playing a team like Florida Atlantic that knows how to play offense, and Army, which plays a completely different style of offense to begin the year. So they're going to have to really learn up and watch a lot of film when they get to the beginning of the year. You're not playing, Arkansas State right off the bat. You're playing Florida Atlantic, and maybe with Chris Robinson being the starter if he can stay out of trouble. So who knows? But what will it take for Oklahoma? Because they've had a top 5 defense in the past few years as far as yards are concerned. But what will it take for Oklahoma to field a top 3 defense in the Big 12 this coming year?
I think it starts up front as always with the big guys. And it seems like they have a serviceable set of guys there. And then again, if they can get Robert Barnes playing well, if they can get Buki playing well, or whoever's going to take that other safety spot, I think they can get top 3, maybe top 5.
Yeah, to me, it's limiting the big plays in the passing game. Again, I've harped on it a lot here so far, but the cornerback spots, not getting beat over the top, especially in coverages when they're really designed not to give up big plays. And you saw last year, for example, Jordan Thomas,
Right.
him guys just running right by him. So, I mean, to me, that's kind of the trick right there. Everything else, on the interior, I think can work itself out. Defending the run and everything, but giving up those big pass plays over the top, they've got to figure that out. And which actually has a lot to do probably as well with getting more consistency, a more consistent pass rush.
Mm-hmm.
They've really only had one guy essentially who was really much of a threat to rush the passer last year in Obo Okoronkwo. So when opponents were shifting the line in their blocking schemes to keep him off the quarterback, other guys just weren't getting home. And if they can, ratchet up the pressure, that will be a big help.
And that's my assumption, and that's my prediction that will happen this year, is that because of the depth of the front four, front seven, in the ways that they've grown stronger, they have more dynamic playmakers to rush off the edge or on the inside, that it'll help the back four a lot. And it's really unnerving, like you said, that they were in coverages that wouldn't allow offenses to get big plays over the top. Like you'd see a cover three that requires a small bit of communication, or just like simply looking on the field, or you'd see them even roll out in quarters, and you'd still see big plays still happen over the top. But it's just completely unnerving, and people wonder why there are 8.5 yard cushions off the wide receiver. It's just to keep everything in front of them, but still things got behind them. But I think, like you said, Alan, that front four, them being able to generate any sort of pass rush towards the quarterback is really going to go a long ways, and I think that's what's going to happen this coming year. Now, before I'm going to throw this out there, I'm going to have you guys go over or under. OU holds their opponents to 23.5 points per game, but in 2017, OU held their opponents to 27 points per game, which was fifth in the league behind TCU, Texas, Iowa State, and Kansas State. And OU held their opponents to 382 yards a game last year, which was fourth behind TCU, Texas, and Iowa State again. So, over under, OU holds their opponents to 23.5 points per game.
I'm going to go over, but I don't think it's impossible they can go under. I think if they can start, and maybe I should have brought this up in the previous point, but if they can start forcing turnovers from game to game, they'll be that top three defense. But right now, until they prove that, I'm going to go over, about 25 points.
Yeah, that point about turnovers is actually one, it's hard to quantify that in terms of, or do they have a top three defense in the Big 12 or what have you, but they really have not done much to force takeaways. I hope that we're going to see more of that this year, them working on coverage schemes to, kind of trick opposing quarterbacks, or even if it's just a matter of getting after the passer and getting him to throw it to the Sooners. But that's a big one. I mean, 23.5 seems a little aggressive, but so I'll stay with the over, but it's in play.
When was the last time, do you guys remember, that Oklahoma's defense forced turnovers and were mildly aggressive on defense instead of giving those cushions and being somewhat conservative?
Maybe that 2014 Sugar Bowl, and maybe the Venables defense, right, in like 2010, 2011, somewhere in there.
Yeah, I'm looking at the numbers, and they actually, I think the 2015 team, if I remember, was actually pretty good. I mean, 27 turnovers on the year. They had Stryker, though, coming from that strong side position, which you didn't really see as often. I think that he really he got in quarterbacks' heads, versus last year I think you had 18. So that's a huge drop. So I think that 2015 team, they could really get after the quarterback, and I think cause a lot of havoc.
I think 2015 comes to mind with Strike, and then that 2013 that Sugar Bowl team. You just remember play after play after those big plays, anyways. After big play, that the defense wasn't afraid to step up, but the defense also knew they had to step up because the offense was garbage. I mean, when you have Trevor Knight he can't throw an out route, or Blake Bell trying to throw over the top, which is actually a tight end. So that 2013 team also pretty well. But shifting gears, Kyler Murray was drafted by the Oakland A's. And early on, like what would you say about during the football season, or not even football season, at the beginning of baseball season, people were like, oh, Kyler Murray, it's nothing really to worry about. Yeah, he'll get drafted, yeah, but it won't be anywhere near a lot of money. Maybe if he gets, I remember discussing it with people on Twitter and people in the mentions and the messages that, oh yeah, if he garners maybe like $1.5 million, $2 million at most, maybe he should probably consider going. The next thing you know, Oakland A's pick him 9th overall with a slot with about $4.7 million, and a Twitter kind of shitstorm ensued over his decision. People like Tom Fornelli saying, "Oh, he's gone," and other fans in the Big 12 celebrating, or Oklahoma fans just kind of melting down that, oh gosh, Kyler Murray is going to get paid. Now we have to deal with Austin Kendall and a backup quarterback, and Mordecai that's never played college football in his life. People didn't really understand the whole situation with like how he could actually get and still play. People, which I think are jackasses, that I think Kyler's heart won't fully be in football if he signs this contract. And then other people that were in multiple mentions saying he hurts the Oklahoma Sooners in the long term if he starts this year and delays the inevitable Austin Kendall Heisman Trophy season. What are your guys' reactions to him being drafted in general, but also all these kind of hot takes coming out right as soon as he is drafted?
I mean, I was happy for the guy. Obviously, like if someone's gonna be successful in the MLB, you got to cheer for him. Like that's some life-changing money. That's like life-altering for his family. As far as Twitter, man, it's just like everybody wanted to be first on some opinion, and they didn't really do any thinking. They just typed something down and sent it.
Yeah, I was very surprised, obviously, that he went as high as he did. Now, I don't consider myself a baseball expert or, especially not a baseball draft expert, but that was higher than I think anybody had expected. So, you knew the money was going to change pretty significantly, but knowing that he could come back, still without, sacrificing any of that money, I think that a lot of people couched it as, well, the A's aren't going to give him that kind of deal without, having some kind of stipulation in place to where he couldn't play football, or they would give him, a pay cut. And I understood where they were coming from, but at the same time, Murray, in that case, he really had all the leverage over him. So to me, it made a lot of sense that he, try to work it to where he'd get 1 year of playing. And, the A's don't really lose anything outside of him starting, a year, I guess maybe more like 6 months later than he normally would have in terms of, becoming a professional baseball player. But, there's of course there are injury risks, but the chances that, he's going to sustain some kind of career ending injury playing football are pretty slim. And on top of that, you can hedge all that with an insurance policy. So, I felt very confident that he'd be back. Knowing what we know now, I think he's clearly going to be all in. He specifically worked this arrangement out so that he can play football for a year. That's not what you do if you're just kind of planning on going at it kind of half-cocked,
Right. And that's kind of my deal with these people that said his heart's not going to be fully in it if he signs that contract for baseball money. It's like, and people are like, well, Austin Kendall should still be the starting quarterback because that means he gets 2 years under his belt and Kyler Murray just coming for 1 year because that's 3 different quarterbacks in 3 different years. And the simple fact is that Kyler Murray, he rewrote all the Texas high school history books as far as football is concerned. He's a 5-star quarterback, elite athleticism. From what I've understood and from what I've been told, not that bad of a passer either. And that's like saying it lightly. He knows how to deliver. He has a long ball. And is he a different quarterback than Mayfield? Definitely. But is his heart not going to be in it? No. Like that's the opposite you should feel if he's going to play baseball, but he says, "Hey, I want to seek out a team that lets me play football for at least 1 year before I can go. So he's not going to take that money, and he's not going to sit out for what he knows what his career or future path is and not have his heart be into it just so he can play, football. Like, he's going to have all of his heart in it, obviously. He can go be earning money and getting a head start on his baseball career. However, he's stopped and wants to play football for Oklahoma. He wants to showcase who he is and what he is. And like you said, Alan, he has all the leverage in this situation. It's amazing to me. And then I thought it was funny. People were coming out with like think pieces about what his decisions were, like a day after he had already made his decision, and the A's came out and said it, and then all the Oakland papers came out and said, oh yeah, by the way, he's playing football. All the people on the draft show for Major League Baseball, they said he's playing football for a year, but people are like, hey, he's playing baseball. It's like, you are not reading or watching or anything, clearly, because, and then what made us confident, even we talked about this before the draft, was Lincoln Riley was really, really cool with it, and he had multiple conversations with Kyler Murray. So it's not surprising that he got drafted. It is surprising he got drafted that high, but it's good to have a 5-star quarterback that knows what he's doing for the fall. You don't want to have like another Rhett Bomar situation, whereas you have a starting quarterback stripped weeks before the season. Of course, this is 2 months, so they would have more time, but nonetheless.
Well, and the thing about it, too, is that you don't go through all the things that Murray was going through. You don't play spring football, or, you kind of check out of spring football. If you're intending to play professional baseball and you just don't care about playing football. I mean, the whole thing was just nonsensical. And the idea that, they need to go with Austin Kendall so they'll have more time with him, that's ridiculous too. You play to win right now. Like, if Murray is the better quarterback of the two, you gain nothing by just punting and playing for the future. You have to win now at all times in college football. That should always be the rule.
I feel like this is where you have a meshing point between college football in Oklahoma and then also NBA basketball in Oklahoma, where you're prepping for the future at the same time as for the present. Whereas like people are saying Austin Kendall should start, so you have continuity for this year, but also for next year. Like, well, hell, if Kyler Murray comes out and plays lights out like many people think he's capable of, and he wins you national title 8, you're not going to be complaining about, Austin and Kendall only gets 1 year. Like, it's absurd. Like you said, you play for the now. This is college football. It's chips in every year. You're not the Philadelphia Sixers and stockpiling draft picks to hopefully get a title team. Yeah, you don't do that. This is not that. This is not Baylor, where you have tons of rape cases, and you're like, well, maybe we'll take on a bunch of kids and change how the Big 12 football is played with the run game. It's unreal that with the way some of these people are thinking. But anyways, since we last talked, 3 guys have committed. You got Joseph Wette, and he is a 4-star guy. He's like a defensive end, kind of jackback sort of guy. You have Marcus Hicks out of Kansas. He is a prototypical defensive end, and also Marcus Alexander, an offensive lineman. Which of these guys do you like the most?
I think you look at Joseph Wette and just what he can be. He looks a lot, at least frame-wise, and can grow into a Obo Okoronkwo a role. I think he's like 6'3", 6'4", somewhere in that range.
Yeah.
And he's a guy that has really, really long arms. You can see that's where his Obo Okoronkwo comparison comes from. He can just stick his arm out and keep a blocker away from him. Marcus Hicks, though, isn't a bad guy. He's got a big frame, 6'5". I think he's like in the 270 range right now, somewhere in there. He's a little bit of a project, in my opinion, but there's high upside there. And then Marcus Alexander, he's a guy that I think kind of flew under a lot of people's radars, including myself. But he's always a name that came up the past few weeks, and I got around to watching his film. He's a guy that can really excel in being a scheme where they keep pulling the guards.
Yeah, to me, the big one of that trio is Hicks, just because, I feel like that strong side defensive end position, the kind of classic, DE, is something that OU just still needs more bodies and more depth there. And so, they're pretty solid at Jack already, with some guys who have, a lot of long-term potential. So, that would be the one to me that I would definitely zero in on there is Hicks.
Yeah, I agree with that. I mean, you have Joseph Wette, and he is, again, prototypical jackbacker. That guy, he is, like you said, Steven, long, athletic, strong, a 4-star guy. Hicks, also a 4-star guy. He's really big frame, carries his weight very well. Now, from the tape I've seen, I mean, I'm not trying to call a kid soft, and he's just going into his senior level in high school, but he's going to be a little bit of a project once he gets onto campus. They can build him into that because I think he's going to be more than what a DJ Ward was. I think he's going to be able to be more physical off that edge on the strong side. And then Marcus Alexander, he's only a 3-star kid, which is kind of surprising because if you look at his tape, he's definitely has major upside. You could definitely see him playing guard for Beatonbow in the next coming years. Now, will it be right away? No, because Beatonbow has built that line to something that's impressive that we haven't seen in a long time. So I like Hicks the most because of the upside that he also brings to OU because, like Alan said, they're kind of set at jackbacker for a while, and I'm not really worried about that at that position. Now, what about linebacker recruiting in general? Now, outside edge rusher linebacker recruiting, they've got it down pat. They're able to recruit outside linebackers. They're able to recruit guys that can edge rush. What's the deal with inside linebacker, and why can't they get a really, really great one on campus besides Kenneth Murray?
I think some of that just has to do with like Big 12 play and how linebackers just don't really have a big role, especially in pass-heavy offenses. And then the other part is they just really haven't produced a big-time linebacker that's gone on to the NFL that's made a name for himself. So there's no real credibility there.
Yeah, I think that kind of sums it up. I mean, for one thing, playing inside linebacker in the Big 12 is just really, really difficult. With all the RPO action, you've got to be able to cover, but you've also got to be able to fill gaps. I mean, it's just a really tough position, and it seems like they've been maybe a little bit slower there to put out offers and whatnot. So I think that we'll see how things go, but my guess is that eventually they'll turn over that position coach fairly in the next year or so, and maybe try to bring in somebody else who can bring kind of a fresh perspective to recruiting that position.
It's okay to say Tim Kish should be fired, Alan, because I don't think you're alone on this podcast, or even maybe just the state in general, or maybe even the OU staff as well. I don't do the oh, this guy's got to get fired or whatever. It's just never not the way I like to operate. But I mean, at this point, the proof is in the pudding there. Yeah, and I think you're completely right. The inside linebacker, I think you guys are both right as far as all the things they have to do. It is an incredibly difficult position to play, especially in the Big 12. But in the way in which the NFL is trending with all this RPO stuff with the Eagles and the 49ers and many of the other teams that are trending, and even they're coming by to Oklahoma to see how Lincoln Riley makes his offense, they're trending in this way, and that's the way in which defenses are going to have to start defending. So you might want to trend in which the way the NFL is going. And so Kenneth Murray might be a shoo-in for the next couple of NFL years, in the next few years when he gets drafted. So that's something to consider now as far as getting guys on campus. I think it's a little bit of league play, but I also think it's a little bit of position coach play, and that is attributed to Tim Kish and other players there. So I don't know. We'll see what happens over the next year, because I don't think Kish will be back next year, and I don't think it'll be his choice either. So we'll just stick with that. But about a year ago, Bob Stoops, shortly after his Tulsa Caravan, where they do the coaches caravan, about a week later, he actually stepped down and resigned and retired from OU football head coach lore. And it was really shocking. What were you guys doing when this happened, and what were your thoughts immediately and how you reacted when Bob Stoops, you got all those updates from texts from friends that Bob Stoops had stepped down? What were you guys doing? What were you thinking?
Yeah, I think I was off that day, and I had I was eating a late lunch, and I was in the kitchen, and I kind of looked at my phone because it was blinking, so I knew someone was hitting me up. And I didn't really mind it too much. In about 5 minutes, I kept blinking and blinking and blinking. And I was like, what's going on? So I looked at my phone. I got that notification that Bob Stoops retired. So I'm like, oh, my goodness. It's either a major recruiting violation or it's something health-wise. And then you started hitting me up, and we had to do that emergency podcast with RDS.
Yep.
Yeah, I was at work, and so I'd been in a meeting, I think, and, my phone was back at my desk, and so I came, out a little bit later. But it was funny because, I don't know if you guys remember, but before, I think this would have been like a Regions meeting, in the spring. They had given Lincoln Riley a pretty big contract for a coordinator. I mean, OU didn't normally do the kind of stuff, over $1 million and, guaranteed years and whatnot. And so, I wrote a piece just kind of saying, well, given that this is so far out of the norm for how Joe Castiglione likes to run an athletic department, I think that, we're seeing here right now that Lincoln Riley is going to be Bob Stoops' successor, and it's funny because somebody who was in the know at the time actually hit me up and was like, I don't know if you're just speculating or something, but like they were like, that's dead on. They were like, Stoops actually almost, he had wanted to retire earlier, or at least talked about it, and so I think that I think the feeling at the time was he would probably stick around, for another year and then maybe hand it over to Lincoln, but. So, anyway, I got the call, that afternoon, and so I can't say that I was completely shocked, just because I knew it had kind of been out there, but at the same time, it was just it didn't really seem real at the time, and especially given that they were handing the program over to a guy who was so young, and I'd only really been at OU for 2 years. I mean, I think that was looked at outside the program as a really big risk, but Stoops has done a fairly good job throughout his career of identifying coaching talent, and I think OU has a good one now in Riley.
Yeah. I remember I was like at a late lunch with my fiance, and I randomly got a text message that was like, "Hey, are you on Twitter right now?" from one of my buddies. And I said no, and then of course I went to Twitter, immediately opened the app, and that's when I see Bob Stoops is stepping down and Lincoln Riley is going to assume the head coaching position. I immediately was just kind of stared at my phone and just scrolled through everything else, like Hoover tweeting and everybody else tweeting about this. And I couldn't believe it. And then I thought, like what you said, Steven, is there a health thing going on? Because I know he had operations, and I know he's just not the same that he's been the past few years. I thought maybe there were recruiting violations, but then again, at the same time, like, if you're finishing like 17th or 18th, probably not so much recruiting violations if you're at Oklahoma. Mm-hmm. So I thought it might be a health thing. And then I was just kind of in shock. Now in the years leading up to it, in the couple years, people said like, "Hey, who's going to be the next successor of Bob Stoops, because he's getting up there?" And this is after the statue gate came out. And who's going to be Bob Stoops' replacement? And people started to think, and I started to maybe surmise that Lincoln Riley, to keep him around, you might have to promote him to head coach eventually, because all these other schools are going to be looking at him always, and every year you're going to be on pins and needles and hoping that some SEC school that just fired their head coach doesn't go after Lincoln Riley, like an A&M or something, that maybe you're going to have to promote him. So I wasn't surprised about the Riley hire, but the Stoops stepping down stuff totally took me by surprise. I thought he had another year in him until his sons got to college. I think that's what many of us were thinking, was that when Drake and Isaac, when they graduate from North, which was this past year, that he would officially then step down. But he just did it a year early, which not really a surprise. And then we had that emergency podcast, like you said. So really, really interesting, really wild year without him. Of course, he's still around the program, just not on the sidelines barking that we've been used to, with his hand on his hip and his headset in the other hand. So something equally maybe as surprising and really disappointing more so. Joel Klatt, who has been a really crusading against college football for OU and Baker Mayfield for the past 3 years, has suddenly come out and is now a Texas Kool-Aid drinker, saying that Texas is going to win the Big 12. What do you guys think?
It'll be interesting to see if he changes his stance on that, just because we're in the middle of off season. Not a lot of things are going to get you clicks unless it's a little bit controversial. So I'm kind of wondering if it's just one of those kind of things.
Oh, I mean, to me, it's not that big of a deal. I mean, OU's replacing, one of the best quarterbacks maybe in college football history with Baker Mayfield. The defense looked terrible. I think that for a lot of people view the situation with Kyler Murray as a real negative, just in terms of there kind of being the uncertainty and distractions. So, I mean, I'm not as optimistic about Texas as he is, but going with somebody other than OU doesn't shock me.
And I think it might be spurning from OU fatigue. Just like people are tired of seeing the Cavs and the Warriors in the finals for 4 years in a row. I think people are tired of seeing OU win 3 years in a row. And it's simple. Of course, they're without Baker Mayfield, and there are questions about the defense, and I get that. But to have Texas jump from no bowl game, okay, now we have Tom Herman with a quarterback that's been concussed twice, but we still play him. Oh, by the way, now they're going to win 10 games, 11 games, and win the Big 12, I think is very, very optimistic. Now, am I sleeping on Texas? No, I've been adamant that Texas should win 8 to 9 games or 7 to 8 games for the past 2 years with the talent they bring in every year. It's just a matter of manipulating that talent in the ways they want them to. But them winning the Big 12 with that defense that they're not bringing back, they're bringing back a core, but they're not bringing back many of those playmakers, and still not a lot of identity on offense. Now I imagine they're going to craft it and mold it into the second year, but no clear-cut winner at quarterback. I just still don't think they get over the hump as far as being the top 3 in the Big 12. Maybe they might be that third choice because Oklahoma State is going to head for a down year, but I don't believe that they'll win the Big 12. Would I be surprised if they made it to the Big 12 championship game? I wouldn't be too surprised, but I wouldn't label them as the Big 12 champions. No. Would you guys be surprised if they made it to the Big 12 championship game?
No, I could see it, especially with the talent they just brought in.
Yeah. Oh no. I think that. It certainly wouldn't shock me if they're there. They've got a tough schedule there to start the season, and that if they can make it through that, though, they'll have a kind of a downhill ride there at the end of the year. So it certainly wouldn't shock me at all to see him in that championship game.
I agree. I just also hate Tom Herman, so there's that. But Twitter questions. We have quite a few. Some of them pretty good. We have 2 from Justin Bush. His is at the Bushinator. He says, who is most likely to be the difference maker on the defensive line this year? What do you guys think?
If we're to believe what's going on, what's being said out of the camp there, but Neville Gallimore, apparently he's really turned a new leaf. He's energized. He's looking good in practice, which he's always been a guy that tests well, but now they're really excited, especially with Benny Wiley there. But someone else is Ronnie Perkins, I think, can really make a difference if he breaks into the rotation. Yeah,
those would be my 2. Gallimore, hopefully he's kind of snapped out of it, with this position change. And Perkins, man, it's just a spring game, of course, but he was really aggressive. He's got good size. He moves well. That was one guy I think that he'll end up contributing this year, which doesn't always happen with freshman defensive linemen.
So I think you guys nailed it with me. I've got Gallimore on the defensive line, and I'd like to go ahead with what Steven said, that every year he tests well in the spring, he tests well in the summer, and people get very, very excited. Like last year, my biggest hope for, my biggest breakout guy maybe was Neville Gallimore. At the end of the year, my biggest disappointment player was Neville Gallimore, and it's been that way for a couple of years. He's just highly touted in the spring, in the summer. They say the lights coming on, and then when it comes time to actually put on some pads and get in the game, it's like he makes occasional plays, but he's not a constant playmaker. He's not always there. So I'm hopeful that his move inside, where he can be just incredibly aggressive and just get upfield, will change his aspect. Now, as far as other players, I'm hopeful that maybe Tyrese Lott comes in and plays some valuable minutes, or valuable downs. I'm hopeful that he's able to put on some good weight and play. But the second question is, and that's why I saved Ronnie Perkins for the second one, is besides Buki, who's the freshman that's most likely to make an immediate impact? I've got Ronnie Perkins because he's massive. He's a freshman. He wears a single-digit number, which is badass for a defensive lineman. You better be a cold SOB if you are a defensive lineman wearing a single digit. You better be good as hell. And I feel like he's going to live up to that for the next few years. But what do you guys think about freshmen that are going to make an immediate impact?
I think Ronnie Perkins is the pick. I'll go someone different. I'll say Jaquaylin Crawford. He's a guy that plays the slot. Michael Jones is out with an injury. We said it again. Basquin's coming back from 2 Achilles tears. I think Jaquaylin Crawford can come in and play right away.
Yeah, since I've already said Perkins and Buki's out, I'll actually take Jalen Redmond. He's a different kind of body there. A little bit bigger at Jack linebacker, and from what I understand, I mean he really stood out early in spring camp. So that would be my pick, Jalen Redmond.
All right. So Ryan Stiles, he says, what is the ceiling and floor for this OU's defense this year? And then a follow-up, I guess, says, what would the defense need to produce in order for Mike Stoops to stay on staff deservingly?
I think we already touched on it before, but starting with the end of that question is turnovers. You got to produce turnovers to win the Big 12, especially with how good these offenses are. If you shut them down one series, you're going to be ahead. Ceiling is what I think. Ceiling, probably top 35 maybe. Floor, maybe like a top. I don't see them falling out of the top 60, hopefully.
Yeah, I don't know how the best way. I mean, we kind of covered a lot of this earlier. In terms of Mike keeping his job, though, the turnovers thing is definitely a big one. And I think that in a lot of cases, there can't be so many guys running free, in the secondary, and plays being made over the top. I think if they cut all that down and can figure out a way to, get some more takeaways, that would be his best bet.
Yeah, I agree with you guys. So that's why I'm moving on to the next one, which is from, and I really enjoy this name. Of course, you're going to listen, Dirty Bob. It's a great name, Dirty Bob. Dirty Bob says, and this is random, has nothing to do with OU football, says, favorite white wide receiver in NFL history.
Ooh, I'm going to go Jordy Nelson just because my family's Packers fans, so I can't do him dirty like that. And Jordy Nelson's he's been a great wide receiver. I know he's at Oakland now.
Wow, this is a tough one. How about Danny Amendola?
Okay, I vibe with that. I'm not going to pick Wes Welker because I think he's kind of an asshole. So I'm going to go with a player that is actually the father of a current player in the NFL. You have Christian McCaffrey for the Panthers. His dad, Ed McCaffrey, played for the Denver Broncos and won the Super Bowl.
That's a good one. That's a good one.
Yeah, I really liked him. Playing with Elway and all that stuff. So he's probably my favorite white wide receiver in NFL history. And then lastly, from Jake Whittison, he says, since we've just passed the 1-year anniversary of Bob's retiring, what is your favorite Stoops moment or moments over the last 19 years?
I don't know if I have a favorite moment. There's whenever he just shows emotion, because Bob was kind of just a melodramatic kind of guy, just didn't really show much emotion unless something happened on the field. So they missed that big field goal, and you have that gif of Bob doing that face where he's just real sad. I think that's a good one. Another one's against Ohio State where he's up in the box and he's just cheering. I mean, that just shows the personality in the guy.
Yeah, gosh, man, he was so pumped up back in 2006 when they won the Big 12 title.
Mm-hmm.
And, I understood why, because that team went through a lot, from Bomar being thrown off the team to Adrian Peterson getting, knocked out in the middle of the year and really missing, I think, probably something like 8 games. I mean, that team just, they went through so much, and I think that he would really, that one to him, I think, was really special, and so I think that that would be the one that I'd single in on.
So there are a collection of moments about Bob Stoops. I think any time when he's being sassy with the media, I really enjoyed. Especially even the opening of this podcast, where there's a sounder of Bob Stoops really saying John Hoover's questions are stupid. So I really enjoyed that one. He says. It's a stupid question then, it's a stupid question, and he still thinks it's stupid, which I really appreciate. But any other time he's talking crap on the SEC, most recently, I think, is the after they beat Auburn, when people were talking about, you have to deal with this SEC-type football, and is it more physical or something to that effect? And Jordan Evans is like, we just go out and play, and that's just our game. And then Bob Stoops kind of just leans over and says, I think it's about time we bury that narrative. And you just see Samaje, Baker Mayfield, and Jordan Evans just start snickering and laughing behind their mics, because we all know how Bob feels about it. So really, anytime Bob's being sassy with the media regarding the SEC or just in general. But last night, while I was in the gym, I get really bored when I'm on the elliptical or I'm on the treadmill, so I watch, just film or from games from previous seasons, and I really dove into 2013, and all that entire season was just a massive journey from having no offense and really leaning on your special teams and defense to win you a lot of games. Trey Millard gets hurt, and you still end up beating Alabama in the Sugar Bowl amidst all of this stuff. That was probably one of the least talented teams OU's had in a while, and they still accomplished a lot. And just that euphoric sense you see with Adrian Peterson on the sideline, hugging Trent Williams, and Bob Stoops getting double showered with the Gatorade. That's second to none as far as things you will remember, because he truly, and they mentioned, the squeezed blood from a stone to get that far to that season. And that's one of my favorite moments of just seeing him on the sidelines over the past years. So that's mine. But moving on to general notes. Turns out Michael Thompson, he gets onto campus at OU. People are very excited about, the light could come on early for him. He could be a contributor this year. Turns out, the first day he's on campus, they notice something's wrong with his leg. Oh, wow. Turns out he tore his ACL, and he's been walking and playing on a torn ACL for about a year now. What are your guys' thoughts on that?
Well, it's interesting just because it's never come up in recruiting articles, or maybe you just never told anybody. But I guess it's a partial tear, which isn't obviously as bad as a full tear. I have a partial tear in my ACL. I can still run around and lift weights and stuff, but playing on that would be rough. But in my mind, he needed another year just to get bigger, get more physical. So this may be a blessing in disguise.
Yeah, I mean, the default with defensive linemen and offensive linemen really should always be that they need, a redshirt year. So it's not a huge loss now. I mean, he's a guy, though, that potentially could have, I guess, maybe worked his way into the rotation. But for the long-term form, I think it's probably, I wouldn't say for the best, but it's not that big of a deal.
Yeah, I agree with you guys. I thought he was gonna redshirt, but it's still kind of surprising. You have this top 100 player, you have a guy that you're on pins and needles, hoping, praying that he makes it to campus, that he clears, that he clears all of his NCAA clearinghouse stuff with school, and then he makes it to campus. Okay, we're in the clear, we're good, and the next thing you know, first day of summer camp. Oh, God, by the way, guys, he has torn ACL. And he just comes out on his Twitter and says, sorry, guys, I have a torn ACL. Not going to play this year. So, according to Rivals.com and other aspects and other recruiting sites, Oklahoma has the number 1 class in front of Alabama. And then, of course, on 247, they have Oklahoma just behind Alabama at number 2. So, recruiting on par with Alabama It's really, really fun, and it's really, really fun to be a fan of college football when you recruit well. So, do you see Oklahoma finishing in the top 5 with this recruiting class that they're constantly bringing in?
That's kind of tough to tell right now, just because so many things can happen in recruiting week to week. Can they go in the top 5? Sure. Will they? Who's to say? I think they're no worse than 10, though.
Yeah, I would bet they end up maybe in the 5 to 10 range. You know, they had so much early momentum and everything, and they've hit a little bit of a lull. Some guys will maybe fade away, or they might lose a few other commitments or what have you. So yeah, I mean, but 5 to 10 is still really good somewhere in there.
Yeah, I agree. I think finishing top 5, 10. Definitely in the top 8, I think that will solidify them. They've been climbing up the rankings each year under Riley, and I just remember that picture of him as soon as Bob Stoops steps down. Later on, you get that image of Riley in what we thought was going to be Stoops' new office. It's Riley making calls to recruits, saying he's the head guy, and continually recruiting. And I think that's one of the reasons why Bob stepped down. He still has a love for football, and he has a burning desire to still coach. But I think the recruiting game, it going from being like seasonal to year round, and especially with Twitter and all that other stuff, he was not about that life anymore. And I think that's something that Lincoln Riley really enjoys and relishes. That's his game, and at such a young age, he's able to do it. So I think that being in that top 8 slot, it's going to be really well for Oklahoma, and that blue chip ratio is going to pay off for them this year, and it's already paying off. And something that I saw on Twitter, which was really, really interesting to me. At first, I thought it was absurd, and then I thought about it a little longer. Somebody said that Oklahoma last year, without Baker Mayfield, would have been a 4-loss team. What do you guys think?
I don't think they'd be a 4-loss team. I see maybe they lose to Ohio State or Oklahoma State, just where they needed a true passer there. But Oklahoma's ground game was phenomenal last year, and I think, if anything, that would have got them to 10 wins.
Yeah, if we're just talking about the 12 regular season games, I mean, 4 would be a lot. I mean, that's as good as Mayfield was. He had a lot of talent around him. Mm-hmm. The defense, was bad, but still, no, I would think 9-3 would have been where they were finished.
Yeah, I think I just keep on pointing back to that Ohio State game, of course, maybe that Kansas State game, but again, that running game was so violent. And, of course, maybe Oklahoma State. So I think at the most you lose 3 games, but I thought maybe it was worth a thought project that maybe somewhere along the lines that you needed a pure passing game. But again, Bill Beatenbow has built such an academy in Norman of offensive linemen and a collection of offensive linemen that you're going to have decent backs and a decent running game for the next 7 years until he retires. So good on him. Something that is completely unrelated from football is a woman in California, and maybe you guys have seen this on Twitter or Reddit. She found a fired bullet in her avocado when she cut it open. First of all, what would you do if that's your reaction? And second, how did it even get there?
I would assume it was in the avocado while it was in the tree or whatever plant it grows on. And it just kind of grew around it because there's no way that it would get in there and then close back up. I'm assuming it was closed up. Mm-hmm. I don't know what to do. I would just call the police or something, or call the factory.
Yeah,
really interesting.
There are many, many, many worse things you could find in your food than a fired bullet. In all honesty, but yeah, it certainly wouldn't have. It certainly was probably already grown, and somebody was out there shooting cans or something out by an avocado. Do avocados grow on trees? I don't even know how they grow.
Do they? I don't know. That's a good question.
So it'd be something like that. But like I said, if you find a bullet, that's odd, but it's definitely not the worst thing.
Yeah, I probably agree with that. My thing is it was found in the avocado. There were no entry or exit holes into the avocado, so I'm just wondering how it got there. Like the shell inside was not the shell, the seed inside was partially broken. So I'm just wondering how it got there with there being no entry or exit bullet holes in the avocado. It's amazing. But anyways, IMDb, they did rank the top 100 best movies of all time, and here the top 5 are from 5 to 1. They've got Casablanca at 5, Raging Bull at 4, Schindler's List at 3, Shawshank Redemption at 2, and The Godfather at 1. What is your favorite movie that you can watch all the time?
I'm not sure if I have a favorite. I'm a big Wes Anderson fan, the director Wes Anderson. So I can always watch one of his movies, whether I've seen it like 5 times or 20 times.
I've seen Heat, and pretty much all of Michael Mann. I like Michael Mann's movies, like Heat, Last of the Mohicans. Miami Vice is one that I end up watching just about every time I see it, which is strange because it's not my favorite movie, and it might not even be my favorite of Michael Mann's movies, but that would be the one that I end up rewatching all the time.
I think a movie that I can rewatch pretty much every week has been The Gladiator with Russell Crowe. That's probably one of my favorite movies of all time, just because of the sheer violence. It's just, but like the interesting storyline, like he goes out there, what's his face thinks he's dead. He takes off his helmet, turns around, and the face the guy gives him is just classic. Like, oh my God, I thought you were dead, and now you're going to kill me. So that's one of my favorite movies of all time. And then lastly, we have this podcast has been challenged to use the word vituperative on this podcast. So we're going to take shots each other at using this word possibly in a sentence. And to be vituperative means to be bitter and possibly abusive. So use the word vituperative in a sentence or name something that is possibly vituperative.
Bitter and abusive. Just want to tie this into Mike Stoops' defense last year, but I'm not going to. I'll have to think on this. I'll go. I don't want to name names either. Give me a second to think of this.
How about this? Big 12 fans were vituperative when they found out the news that Kyler Murray had signed a guaranteed contract with the Oakland A's and would be playing football with the Oklahoma Sooners in the fall.
That's a good one, Alan. Also known as salty.
I would just go OU Twitter in general. The past like 2 weeks.
Oh my gosh.
It's been a war.
Yeah, the OU Twitter civil war where people were actually taking sides, and I was just kind of hanging out and not doing any of that.
Watch it all happen.
Yeah, it was like fireworks early. So, I would say that this question and this challenge in itself is vituperative. So, there you go, Robin. Yeah, I hope you enjoyed yourself. But anyways, that's all that I have. Alan, before we let you go, is there anything you'd like to plug?
Oh, you guys, all my stuff is at BlatantHomerism.com. I also write for Athlon Sports occasionally, so check it out there. And also, you probably find me on Twitter at Blatant Homerism. Always happy to chop it up with college football fans.
All right, well, that about wraps us up. So follow us on Twitter. There's me, Kamiar Marabian, at BoomtownRW. There's Stephen Brown, at OU Updated SB. There's our special guest, Alan Kenney, at Blatant Homerism, like he said. Check out our website, roughriders.com. Lots of stories to be coming soon. Also, the interactive prediction charts and recruiting. Honestly, and get in on the Discord. Guys, I've been, even while we've been podcasting, my phone has been lighting up about the Discord, about just interesting news that is happening, recruits that we're in on, recruits that we're not in on any longer as far as the Oklahoma Sooners are concerned. And lastly, Boomer Sooner.
Fuck you, bitch, and all your friends. That's an everyday scenario. Now here you go. Now here you go. Yeah. That's an everyday scenario. Now here you go.
Pretty ugly.